the major thrust of the AU's humanitarian policy is to launch Africa Humanitarian Coordination Platforms, which is aimed at managing early warning signs of conflict and to oversee intervention to halt violence before it escalates to widespread humanitarian disaster. AU's head of Political Affairs, Peace and Security Department, His Excellency Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, has also convened a meeting in Addis Ababa with relevant stakeholders to discuss the level of enforcement of human rights and addressing humanitarian crisis. Given the current situation of some African countries of continuing violence and other deleterious circumstances, how possible is it for the African Union to realize its objective of silencing the guns by 2063 as well as meeting other challenges? This forms the basis of our discussion today on Isthmus Daily Rendezvous, and I'm your brother and friend Angelique Kaliki, and this is Isthmus TV. You are welcome back from that short break. Remember, and this is still Isthmus Daily Rendezvous, and today we have been discussing how realizable, how feasible it is for the African Union to realize its objective of silencing the guns by 2063. Okay, and today we are just proposing this lofty objective with what is happening in some of the war-torn African countries. If you look at it critically, if you look at the continent critically, you'll find out that you still have various countries where violence is prevalent, right? Where wars are going on and other human right abuses are also obtainable. So if you look at countries like Sudan, Congo Democratic Republic, Somalia, Malawi, Mozambique, Madagascar, Mozambique, and all other countries, you find out there is full-fledged, somewhat ongoing civil war in these countries. Not to talk of, in other countries like Nigeria, Gambia, and all those places you have pockets of unrest, and retaliation by bandits and other aggrieved parties or group. You know, how is this lofty goal going to be realized? Of course, we've highlighted before that a high-powered delegation and meeting of all stakeholders have been held in Addis Ababa just a month ago. Is it 2 months ago in May, led by our own ambassador Bankole Adeoye. All right, and he stressed in that meeting that the AU is collaborating with Germany, all right, to ensure that its security architecture and apparatus is strengthened, all right, so that this vision will be realized. Now we're just opposing this vision with what is obtainable in Nigeria, their country. And then we ask the Ministry of Interior, on whose shoulder falls this very important responsibility. And there are some questions we want to ask, okay? They are the ones that will be the best position to enlighten Nigerians on the steps that the ministry is taking to ensure that this vision is realized. Now we're looking at in Nigeria in the nearest future where will be no Boko Haram, no incidents of farmers and headers clash. We're having the Niger Delta and we're having the up north, Boko Haram, Niger Delta, resource control, Palava, and all that. In Nigeria, where human rights will be respected by all and sundry. Okay, so these are the questions that we want to ask the ministry, all right, the minister, all right, the Honorable Minister Olobimi Tunjiojo. All right, the first question is this: what is the ministry of Interior doing to ensure that the vision is also realized in Nigeria? Okay, please, if there's any way you will respond to these questions, do that for Nigerians. Then we have the second question, that is, what is the ministry doing to also dictate fake victims of humanitarian crisis? Now, what we have gathered so far is that, in areas where, there are incidents of um, uh, clashes between, whether it's communal or, you know, the one held by external figures, all right? Um, that there are people who will willingly, all right, relocate to those areas in order to, take the benefits that the government normally doles out to the people in those areas. People who were not affected at all, they will just relocate. So, is there a mechanism in place to fish out all those people who will just, leave their homes and their areas and towns and then go to an area where they think that there is a free fall for everyone? All right. And then the last question we want to ask today is this: in the event that a disaster occurs in the remote areas, has the ministry any mechanism which, will ensure prompt, intervention, in by way of addressing those things? But like we have normally have in Nigeria, incidents of flood, and or intra-communal clashes, what does the ministry do to prevent, there's this issue with alignment and giving predictions that are never respected, and then at the end of the day the flood, occurs and humongous property and lives are lost. You know, so how can we prevent? We're looking about is this program is about promoting what we can do, to have a better society. All right. So these are the questions we have for the Minister of Interior. Now we're going back to our own ambassador Bankole Adeoye, the head political affairs, peace and security of the African Union. All right. So now he said, for this lofty objective of the African Union to be realized, that they are working in synchrony, working closely with the German government. All right. Another things they said they will promote is, strengthening multilateralism. Okay. There's this issue of free trade. Okay. That is obtainable in ECOWAS member states, all right, and ECOWAS member countries, where someone can freely move from one country to another. But that has not been domesticated, in the whole of the continent. For instance, if I'm moving from West Africa to East Africa, I have to get a visa. No matter what, how short, I'm going to stay in East Africa. The same is applicable to Southern African region. Have you seen it? But they're trying to look at domesticate or implement a machinery that will, or a mechanism that will ensure that people can move without, the rigorous process of obtaining visas and travel documents. Have you seen it? Okay, and then um, exchange of goods and services. The exportation. Those are exportation in exportation business can also, freely, do their businesses without, much hassles and difficulties. Okay, and then the question we are asking is this for the African Union, security head is this, or are these rather, these, you know, um, usurpers of power, these unlawful violators of human rights. They operate as if, they are being sponsored. If you look at what we had when we had the Boko Haram issue in Nigeria, they had a territory where they operated from. When are we going to demystify those who are who are behind, rather, behind these elements who cause, loss of life and destruction of property and disruption of our economic, life and businesses. When are we going to find out who are the people who behind these guys? Because the way they operate, you set up security, like in Nigeria they had Operation Lafia Dole that I know about, the one that was after those guys, those what do you call it, Boko Haram elements, okay, those days. But the way the Boko Haram elements operate, before the operation Lafia Dole will come to where they are, they have disappeared. So who gives them the information that the military is after them? So that's the issue. Have you seen it now? So when are we going to truly demystify, to find out who these people are? All right. Okay. And then the next thing that we want to ask is this. Um, how can these terrorists be financed and there won't be any traces? Of course, I've been in the banking industry. There's something they call anti-money laundering, mechanism that these banks have. So how come that wars can, you know, be financed, these kind of activities be financed, and it cannot be dictated by Nigerian banks? I don't think that is possible, right? When they pay for the weapons that they use, is it not banks that they make use of in making the transfers and all those things? So that's the question we are only asking. How are they funded in such a way that no one finds out how they go about it? Okay, remember that over 230 million Nigerians are affected. Not Nigerians only, worldwide. Those are the statistics that we have got online, that over 230 million people are affected by this humanitarian crisis. When and what are we going to ensure that our world becomes a better place? My name is MC Lekili, and we'll continue after this short break. Let's